Welcome back to the FTN NFL Team Preview Series. I'm your host, Mike Randle. Follow me on X at Randle Rant. And we are, of course, sponsored by Boom Fantasy. They're the top choice for daily fantasy sports action. Most innovative games cater to the casual or the hardcore fan. 500 times your entry you can win at Boom Fantasy. Download on the App Store and Google Play. Use that promo code FTN to get a no-sweat bonus up to $100. And today, folks, we are going to New Orleans. We're going to talk about the Saints with one of the great insiders there, John Hendrix on X at John J. Hendrix. He's a Saint lead writer and reporter for Saints News. He's the host of Second and Saints as well. You can find him on X. Great insight. John, I appreciate a few minutes here. Let's start with the big name. Let's start with Alvin Kamara. Last year, maybe not as efficient as he's been in the past, but he's still ranked second among all running backs and targets. Talk about Kamara, the contract, the situation, and the backfield in general for the Saints coming into 2024.
Yeah, look, I think, we're not at a point right now where it's time to hit the panic button when it comes to Alvin Kamara because their camp is going to handle this, right? I don't foresee a holdout with Alvin Kamara. He just wants some assurances that he's their guy and that he gets a little bit more of a guaranteed, type of financials, if you will. And so, look, he's going to be a big part of this Clint Kubiak offense, which is obviously the biggest storyline for New Orleans is the fact that they got Clint Kubiak and it basically did an overhaul in their entire offense. And so now it plays better to Derek Carr and his ability. It plays better for what Alvin Kamara could do. They envision him kind of in a Christian McCaffrey type of role where he can do a little bit of everything and then some. And so obviously it was kind of a down year in some aspects for Alvin. He had the 3-game suspension. He had set out the finale because of injury. But look, I think when you look at all the target shares, when you look at everything, the breakdown, he's still a guy that's going to end up playing 60% of the snaps for the Saints offense. And I think that they're going to better find a way to utilize him. This Kubiak offense, it's a hybrid between like a Shanahan versus a Gary Kubiak offense, right? And that's kind of where you're looking at this hybrid. So it's a lot of play action. It's a lot of motion. It's a lot of outside zone, outside running, all these types of different things, pitches, tosses, anything like that. And I think that best guarantees Alvin because he has very good balance, he has very good patience, very good vision. And that is a combination for him to get a lot of extra yards and just be able to find those open lanes. But it also hinges on that Saints offensive line, which has a lot of question marks. But I definitely see an up year for Alvin Kamara in a lot of ways for if any fantasy owner that wants to look his way.
Yeah, and the other part of the backfield, I find that Kendre Miller, from what I'm reading online, is very polarizing. Some people expect him to take a big step forward. Others are hearing rumors that he's not ready. So talk about those other 40% with the offensive line, like you said, which is hoping to improve, get revamped a little bit. And there's some questions there. Who else in the backfield, if anyone here, you think will share it with Alvin enough to make an impact?
Yeah, I think it's Kendre Miller, right? I think if you're looking at Alvin Kamara, this is a guy, if you're in a dynasty league, he should absolutely be on your roster. If you're in looking for a sleeper, Kendre Miller is a guy that I would keep an eye on. Now, you got to remember, like, he got hurt last year. He came into the Saints hurt, right? And he didn't make his debut until later in training camp. And then obviously the track history, he played up until the Chicago game, and then he got hurt, and we never heard from him again. Alvin got hurt in week 17 against the Bucs. Kendre Miller ends up being the guy in week 18. And that was what we expected to see out of Kendre Miller most all year, is that was the guy that he did some things in the running game, the receiving department. And look, I think when you look at him, he's the future, if you will. I think he's the guy that is going to cut in the most to Alvin's target share. Jamal Williams, look, going from the high in Green Bay, with Detroit, and then going to New Orleans and not having nearly a fraction of the touchdown production or any of the production, really disappointing. But a guy that works hard, a lot used in passing formations, blitz pickups and such. He's somebody to keep an eye on. But when you're looking at the running back situation, Kendre Miller, I would expect him to start getting into Alvin's target share. It might force Alvin to go, 50% or in that range, that 50 to 60%. And then Kendre's could get increased reps. And so I think he's a guy that can be pretty sneaky for the Saints offense. And look, when it's all said and done, I wouldn't be surprised if his target share might increase towards the back half of the season if they can't get what they need out of Alvin early on.
Derek Carr, sort of, again, a polarizing player, did finish strong, I think, last year. And you look at those overall numbers, really weren't that bad. Derek Carr coming into this year, frame of mind for the Saints fans, and how you think it's going to go for the lead quarterback here for New Orleans.
Yeah, look, I think you got to look at this back half of this production. Pretty much those last 6-7 games, that's the Derek Carr that you should expect this year. Now, I know he's not ranked very favorably. He's probably not going to be anybody's QB1, but I think if you're looking at a QB2, a strong handcuff backup situation, or somebody, if he gets injured, he's somebody to keep an eye on, because this is he had input in bringing this offense on with Clint Kubiak. He used his brother David Carr. That's why I brought up Gary Kubiak earlier. He used David Carr's insight to this particular offense, and it caters to him, because when New Orleans was having their struggles, particularly on third downs in the red zone, it was because they weren't doing a lot of the elements that they did in the back half of the season with the play action, the motion, all these different things that are now instilled into this offense is a Kubiak staple of the Saints offense now. Like, they had been running the same offense, pretty much the same version since 2006, right? It just never changed and evolved, if you will. And so I think Derek's in for a strong season. Now, I'm not going to tell you he's going to be an elite top 10, top 5 quarterback in this league. The Saints only need him to be a top half of the league guy, right? And he can flirt with being in that top 10. I still think he has that potential, just the sheer fact that he's good with his decisions. He can get you some yards, but the Saints were in some situations where they did have to play a lot of catch up. And so that does benefit fantasy owners in some aspects. I would expect him to be a lot more competitive this year. And so Carr's numbers may fluctuate a little bit, but definitely somebody you should keep an eye on as a QB2. And especially, I think you got to draft him, right? I would be really shocked if somebody does not draft him at all in a fantasy draft, especially if you're in a quarterback league that you're taking one of the top options and you need somebody filling in that bye week. He's a solid option, I think, for you.
Yeah, John, people forget Derek Carr last 4 weeks of the season, 3 touchdowns, 2 touchdowns, 4 touchdowns, only 1 interception for the 12 touchdowns over that period. Go to the wide receivers. Chris Olave, obviously someone we think could have a real breakout season and really take a step forward from where he's already been. Rashid Shaheed getting a ton of buzz, let me tell you, across the industry. And A.T. Perry, a guy I love in preseason. He's sort of around, made a mark last year. Can he take a step forward? Talk about the wide receivers before we get to the tight ends for Carr in this offense.
Yeah, look, I think Chris Olave is going to be a stud in this offense, right? I think that you look at his production in the first 2 years, it's been good. It's been solid, right? But he knows, and the team knows, he has another level that he can hit. And so he's focusing on going from being a good receiver to an elite receiver. He's putting in the work. He bulked up again this offseason. He's got a new wide receivers coach in Keith Williams, who was the Ravens coach, wide receivers coach over there. And so I think the sky's the limit for him. He has the right mindset. Obviously, Michael Thomas is out of the picture, and so he is going to be their number one guy. And when it comes to target share, I expect him to get the bulk of the targets. The Saints, they are going to be more of a running team, run-first team, but I think that's still going to mean good things for Chris Olave. He's going to be the guy that gets a lot of looks and is going to be counted on moving the sticks a good bit too. And so I think the sky's the limit for him. I know he's ranked probably top 20, top 25 in overall picks for fantasy this year. I would definitely stick with him. He's a good, solid, under the radar option outside of the big names, if you will. But Rashid Shaheed, man, you talk about this new kickoff rule. That's, I think, where you're going to get the most benefit from him. Is he's going to be a return machine. He is outstanding when it comes to the kick return. If you kick to him, it's not going to end up well. He's going to get you some return yards. He can get you some return touchdowns. He's more than just a deep threat. You look at this Clint Kubiak offense. I looked a lot about what they did with Justin Jefferson. And of course, I'm not saying he's Justin Jefferson, but they put Justin Jefferson in the backfield a couple times when he was with Minnesota and Kubiak calling it. They got creative looks for Rashid Shaheed. So he can be more than just a deep threat guy who can put it in the end zone a couple of times. I think he can be get a couple of more targets this year. I think he can get more yak this year. I think he's somebody that's going to find the end zone a lot more this year. And so I'm really high on Rashid Shaheed. And those are the 2 receivers that I'd say you definitely got to come away with drafting for the Saints. And as far as A.T. Perry, look, he's a great story. Amazing guy to know in the locker room. And so I think he's somebody that can benefit from increased reps, right? Because they brought in Cedric Wilson. He's their slot guy right now. And they got Equinemius St. Brown. He's also another guy to keep an eye on. But when it's all said and done, I think A.T. Perry is a guy that you look at and, man, he's a big-bodied guy. He just needs to focus on doing what he needs to do to be successful in this league. And he's got a great coach in Keith Williams. And I think that he can become somebody that, you look at guys to keep on at least a watch list. If you're in a dynasty league, you got to get him, right? If you don't have him already, you got to get him, because I think he's somebody that can get increased work, increased reps. Maybe it's more of a boom or bust type thing with him for sure right now, but I think when it comes down to it, you saw a player that was, inactive most of the early part of the season. Then he got called upon, had his big moments against Minnesota. Then he just made big play after big play after big play and found the end zone a lot. And so I think he's got a lot more in the tank to offer for this team in 2024. And I would definitely keep him on your radar.
Tight end, Juwan Johnson injury update, and Taysom Hill. I'm starting to believe that this could be the year where he has the biggest impact across the offense, just from what I'm hearing out of OTAs and reading. What say you here? Juwan Johnson, Taysom Hill.
Yeah, what I was told on Juwan, the early time frame was about 6 to 8 weeks, right? And so we'll see what ends up happening, but obviously it's an unfortunate setback. And so now it's beneficiaries for guys like Foster Moreau on the roster. They could add to that position. I will tell you, without talking about Taysom Hill or Juwan, a guy that you should probably put on your dynasty rookie watch list is Dallin Holker, their undrafted rookie out of Colorado State. I wouldn't tell you yet that you need to pull that trigger, but I'm just saying keep an eye on it. I think he's somebody that's going to end up making this final roster, somebody that's going to end up being a really good passing threat for the Saints offense that nobody really knows or talking about. But when you look at Juwan, you look at his back half of the production last year after you got kind of challenged by the coaches in that Giants game. He was one of the better tight ends in that down the stretch. He was just making big plays and making big catches, and that's what they need from Juwan Johnson. And so I think it's one of those, if you have to play a tight end, be cautious about drafting Juwan because you just don't know what you're going to get week after week. But I think this offense, again, he's going to also be one of those beneficiaries of increased target shares, increased looks. But Taysom Hill, man, if he's still a tight end, grab him. I think he's somebody, again, boom or bust with Taysom Hill. You know that if you're a fantasy owner and have had him on your roster, but he's lining up at tailback. He's lining up at fullback. He's still going to do QB powers. He plays special teams. He does tight end work. He's still going to work with them. He's going to be that Kyle Juszczyk type person for the Saints offense. The you don't want to call it the 49ers version or anything, but it's copycat league, whatever you want to call it. But similar to that, but obviously he brings so much more to the table. So he's a heck of a player. Very exciting to see what he's going to do. And, they got an offensive coordinator that's going to know how to use them, when to use them, which is something they didn't really have last year.
Yeah, great point. As always, John, remember week 15, 16, 17, Juwan Johnson, 3 straight games with a touchdown, and Taysom Hill, Swiss Army knife always involved. Listen, incredible stuff. Last question, then we will get you out of here. Really appreciate it. Very fantasy-friendly advice as well. Strength of schedule. Saints last year had one of the easier ones. This year, again, per Vegas projected opponent win totals, 6th easiest strength of schedule. So how do you see it? Defense changes, offensive line. How do you see it going for the Saints this year, including that schedule as we head into 2024? Exciting time. A lot of positive stuff on offense also.
Yeah, look, I mean, strength of schedule is just a piece of information, right? I don't think that people should really buy into that much. And Saints were a prime example of it last year. It didn't do them any favors. Teams are supposed to get better every year. I mean, that's kind of what you see. And so, look, they're going to be tested out of the gate, right? They got Carolina at home to start. Then they got to go to Dallas. Then they host Philly. So those are big games for this team. And of course, you have them facing the AFC West this year, the NFC East, all those different types of games. They got some real big, good ones on the schedule. Look, I know the win total. I think they're a 9-win team still. I don't see anything. I know I buy higher than what Vegas is on them right now. I think they can still be a 9-win team easily. They just got to prove us wrong and push them over that 10-win mark or 11-win mark. But I'm higher on them than maybe I should be. But at the same time, I think there's enough reason for us to be optimistic because the defense is going to still be a strong, formidable unit. Their secondary is as talented as it comes. Their linebacking unit, Mario Davis, I mean, he's just proving that Father Time's just a number, right? And just a made up myth. And then the pressure's on their front line, the trenches is, can they get after the quarterback better? And that's why they added a guy like Chase Young to the mix. And so again, I think defensively, no fall off really. They hopefully can be better, especially in the takeaway department. They were a top 10 unit last year in fantasy points. And, offensively, the hope is they're better. And that's all they need to do is play complementary football and get back into the win columns. But they're going to be tested out of the gate. But I like them to be at least a 9-win team this year.
Well, listen, if you need information for the Saints, only person to go to is John Hendrix here on X at John J. Hendrix, Saints lead writer, reporter for Saints News, host of Second and Saints. Follow him, does great insight. John, we appreciate that. Was great across the board. So many details. We'd love to connect with you as we get into August here, close to the start of the season. Saints going to be right in the middle of it throughout the year. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Have a good rest of the show.
The NFL Team Preview Series is sponsored by Boom Fantasy, your top choice for daily fantasy sports action. Boom Fantasy has the most innovative games that cater to both casual and hardcore fans. Win up to 500 times your entry only at Boom Fantasy. Download now on the App Store and Google Play. Use promo code FTN to get a no-sweat bonus up to $100.